We have engineered a civilization across 7 episodes. We have mapped out the cold, precise machinery of the shield. The courts that don't arbitrate with your life, the money that can't be dissolved by a politician's ink, the safety net's woven from handshakes instead of tax codes, and the weapon that balances the scales of force on your own doorstep. But a fortress is only as strong as the person standing on the battlements. You can live, and let me say this again, you can live in a perfect minarchy. You can inherit a system that respects every square inch of your property line. But if your soul still seeks a master, if your mind still searches for a collective to absorb your failures, you are still a dependent. You are a subject wearing a free man's coat. The state is not just a collection of buildings in Washington, D.C., or a stack of statutes in a county clerk's office. The state is a psychological condition. It is the belief that you are too small to survive your own choices. Today, ladies and gentlemen, fellow libertarians and minarchists and conservatives, we've reached the summit. This evening, we leave the structures behind and look at the engine that drives it all. This evening, we'll talk about the maximal individual in 60 seconds. We are so far removed from the idea of America and its minarchism written in the United States Constitution, where we have to bring her back to where she belongs. Thank you for listening to this episode of Chasing Life, Liberty, and Minarchy. For over a century, collectivist philosophers and state sociologists have warned that the individualism is a form of social rot. They use terms like atomization or alienation, arguing that if you strip away the state's paternal embrace, human beings will devolve into feral, self-serving predators. They paint a picture of a world where it's every man for himself and the weak are ground into dust. But folks, I'm here to tell you this is the great intellectual inversion of our age. These people want you to believe that the choice is between subjugation and isolation. They hide the technical reality that the more powerful, independent, and self contained the individual becomes, the more capable they are of forming deep, uncoerced, high trust alliances with others. The state, these people think the state creates community, but we all know that's far from the truth, right? It's crowding out your capacity to build one, actually, right? This evening, we're going beyond the shield to close the circuit. We're defining the maximal individual, the architecture of absolute responsibility. We're moving from the therapeutic state where you are a permanent victim of environmental variables to the sovereign self, where your life is an unvarnished ledger of your own actions. It makes me bothered that this is the final chapter of this 8-part series. I had fun making this one with you guys. I've had a lot of fun, and I don't know, a lot of you've gotten a lot of great information from it. Maybe you've applied some of it to your own life in one way, one form or another. But there is another series coming. Don't worry. Got a couple things in the works. There's another one to come, another 8-part series. So don't think we're going away. Minarchy should always live. Before we get to the meat and potatoes, make sure you guys are liking, sharing on your social medias, with your friends on your phone, all that good stuff. Make sure you're checking us out on the Patreon, patreon.com/TOLMF. Make sure you check us out at torchoflibertymedia.com. Check out our advocacy project, the Ninth Amendment Project.org. Make sure you check us out there too. You get all the ins, the nos, and the outs, and all that good stuff of Torch of Liberty Media. All right, let's get into this. Y'all ready? Y'all ready to go? Let's go. Let's get this so we can get up out of here. So the journey I want to take you down this evening, right, is the technical, neurological, and feedback loop of freedom. Okay. I've called it the neuroeconomics of responsibility, and you'll understand why once we get through this, right? In psychology, right, there's a concept known as the locus of control, right? An individual with an extreme locus believes that their success or failure is determined by outside forces, the economy, the system, the state. An individual with an internal locus knows that while they cannot control the wind, they're entirely responsible for the set of their sails, right? So let me add some contextual nuance to this a second, just in case somebody's not kind of understanding where we're going here, right? Let's talk about the moral hazard of the welfare state, right? Because we know that the modern administrative state is systematically engineered to shift your locus of control from internal to external, right? This is a deliberate process, right, of learned helplessness. We've heard this before, haven't we? Right? We just experienced it last November, right? November past. I can't do without my food stamps. Blah. Right. We know we're going to go rob everything. You know that this is the learned helplessness. Right now, providing an ex ante guarantees subsidizing your bad decisions, inflating away your savings to bail out institutions, and stepping in to eliminate risk. The state creates a profound moral hazard. Have they not? When you remove the negative feedback loop of a bad choice, you physically alter the risk calculation machinery of the human brain. You breed a population that is highly reactive, deeply anxious, and emotionally fragile, incapable of long term economic planning. I mean, I don't think anybody's disagreeing with that point. I would hope not, because I think it's 100% factual, right? If we look at our cultural landscape in the United States today, right? Every failure is structural. Every grievance is systemic. The legal system, right? The legal system has evolved from a mechanism of restitution to a mechanism of retribution of blame, right? If you make a bad investment, you demand a regulatory bailout, right? If your community fractures, you petition for a federal grant. We have traded the hard, sharp corners of personal character for the soft, suffocating pillows of bureaucratic insulation in our current state, right? But see, in our minarchy state, the shield does not protect you from reality. It protects you from aggression, but it leaves you entirely exposed to the consequences of your own judgment, right? Being accountable for your own actions, right? If you invest poorly, you go bankrupt. If you sign a bad contract, the court enforces it against you. This isn't cruelty. This is the ultimate form of respect, right? By allowing the full weight of consequence to rest on your shoulders, our minarchist framework restores the internal locus of control. It forces the individual to develop what's called actuarial maturity, right? The technical, and those that don't know what that is, right? That's the having the capacity to assess risk, build reserves, and cultivate resilience, right? And as a maximal individual, right? You shouldn't, you don't whimper when the storm hits, right? Right? You own the damage, rebuild the perimeter, and adapt the strategy, right? Y'all have heard me say it before, right? Assess, adapt, and overcome. Assess, adapt, overcome. That's what a maximal individual does. No matter what's going on, right? Let's take Florida. We deal with hurricanes all the time. We know that hurricane's coming. We've already prepared our defenses against high water. Mostly, you can't defend against high wind, but you can defend against high water. All right. You go overnight through the storm. You got 2-3 feet of water. You got a 9-foot storm surge, 10-foot storm surge. That's came up into your premises. right? Instead of running to FEMA asking for a handout, you come out, you assess what's happened, you adapt to what has happened, you make it better, and you overcome that circumstance. It's no different than life. When you face any type of adversity, you assess, then you adapt, and you overcome the circumstance. And with that, this this brings us to the core structural critique of the minimal state, right? And when that these kind of the example at the hurricane I just brought up, right? The statists, the people that are you know adherent to the state, they'll say things like, without the state to bind us, how do we build anything great? How do we build infrastructure, space programs, or cultural monuments if we all just are isolated islands, right? My answer for these type of people will always be, there's a total difference between coerced collectivism and hyper association, right? Now let me give you an example of this, right? So when we talk about, let's talk about the sociology of the voluntary order, right? And Alexis de Tocqueville, in his analysis, Democracy in America, he observed that Americans had a unique, staggering capability that set them apart from the state-dominated cultures of Europe, right? The power, right, of voluntary association, right? He noted in his paper, Democracy in America, that whenever there was a problem to be solved, a road to be built, an economy to be found, a church to be raised, Americans didn't petition a minister or a king. They formed a private committee, they pooled their capital, signed a covenant, and executed the task at hand, right? What I just described to you is the technical reality of the maximal individual. A society of sovereign nodes does not lead to isolation. It leads to incredibly dense, highly efficient network of voluntary contracts, right? See, today in the United States, the state has monopolized association through tax exemption classifications, corporate regulation, and public private partnership. If you want to build an infrastructure project, you must navigate a multi year labyrinth of environmental impact statements, state grants, and federal compliance modules. The state has made it practically illegal for citizens to simply cooperate without a bureaucratic chaperone. This has withered the social muscles of the population, leaving them dependent on centralized management for even the simplest of civil tasks. Now let's talk about our America's model that we have created, right? Because obviously, right, state paternalism is not a thing in Minarchy, right? So by default, we dismantle the chaperone state and we unlock what I said in the second half of our comparison, hypersociation, right? Because let's think about it and this is going to be two different models within one, right? So we have to break it down, right? So we have the contract network and we have the infrastructure market. So let's go with the contract network a second, right? Because in our American society, corporations are not creatures of the state granted special immunities. They are networks of private contracts backed by personal liability. I hope y'all see the difference so far, right? Now, in the infrastructure market, if a community needs a highway, a water treatment facility, or an aerospace port, it is funded, built, and operated through private consortiums and stakeholder covenants, right? In our minarchist state, the shield does not dictate the terms of the corporation. It merely ensures that no party uses fraud or force to break the deal. When the individual is maximal, association becomes a precision tool. You just don't join a group out of tribal dependency or state mandate. You join because your values, your capital, and your goals align perfectly with the contract. You remain a sovereign component within a voluntary collective. Remember, guys, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff here on Rumble, Patreon, all that good stuff. Share it with your peoples, all that. I know we're having a great conversation right now. We're doing the things as always, and we will continue to always do the things because it's worth it. This is what we do. So let's talk about a component of this is the actual metaphysics of the sovereign self, right? Because this is ultimately the philosophical baseline of this entire series. Why have we spent eight episodes breaking down the technical mechanics of minarchy? Why does the size of the state matter down to the decimal point of a tax rate, right? So let's go back historical reference a second, right? John Locke, right, laid down the foundational axiom of liberty, self-ownership, right? You own your body, which means you own your labor, which means you own the property created when your labor transforms to the material world, right? This is a clean, non-contradictory moral equation, and it's not debatable, right? But when the state expands beyond the shield, when it begins to manage your health, your retirement, your money, your children's minds, it is asserting an alternate metaphysical claim. It is claiming that it owns a fraction of your body. It is claiming that your life is a public utility and your energy belongs to the state's ledger, right? Here in the United States, I've kind of I figured it out when I was writing this episode out, right? We live under a system of therapeutic totalitarianism, right? Think about it. The state doesn't just demand your tax dollars, it demands your compliance with its moral orthodoxy. It monitors your speech through digital gatekeepers. It tracks your wealth through financial panopticons. It treats your independence as a mental illness or domestic security threat. You're allowed, right, to be an individual only to the extent that your individuality remains profitable and compliant to the administrative apparatus. See, as minarchists, we reject the public utility model of the human soul, right? We understand that our sovereignty is absolute, underwritten by the second shield we claimed last episode, right? The state does not exist to make you good, to make you safe, or to make you equal. The state is a tool, a bloodless, rigid, restricted mechanism that does one thing and one thing only. It holds the perimeter line against aggression. And inside that perimeter, you're the absolute author of your destiny. If you want to spend your life sitting on a porch counting gold coins, that's your right. If you want to risk everything to build a multiplanetary shipping conglomerate, That is your right. Your life is not a resource for the collective to vote on. It is your private property. As we close out here this evening, I want to remind y'all as we reflect on the previous 7 episodes, right? How we've dismantled the illusions that have kept the modern world in chains. Excuse me. Episode 1, we exposed administrative state as an occupying force in your neighborhoods. Episode 2, we reclaimed the courts from bureaucratic discretion and anchored them in private contract. Episode 3, we revived the lodge practice to show that voluntary compassion is a financial fortress. Episode 4, we talked about exposing fiat money as a slow motion theft of your biological timeline. Episode 5, we liberated the mind from the assembly line of Prussian schooling. And we put the sword of defense back to where it belongs, back in your hands. But as this final live audio episode fades into the digital ether, the infrastructure we've built on paper means nothing without the spark of your will. The state does not retreat because of an argument. It retreats when it encounters a human being who is simply too big to be governed. It retreats when it runs into an individual who takes absolute fanatical responsibility for every breath they take, every dollar they earn, and every boundary they defend. The shield is ready. The logic is bulletproof. And history is on our side. But I'm going to tell you, the choice is yours. And here's something to ask yourself. Are you going to spend the rest of your days as a statistic in a bureaucrat's database, or are you going to step across the line and claim your sovereignty? Stop asking for permission. Stop waiting for an election. Stop looking to a savior. Build your perimeter. Earn your sound assets. Train your body. Educate your lineage. Lock your shield with the people you trust. The night is mighty long, people. The night is long, but the morning belongs to the sovereign. I want to thank you, those of you that have walked the line with us in this journey, in the move from Sunday to Mondays with us. I want to thank you for willing to chase the light, because the journey doesn't end here. It begins the moment where you put your mobile device down, your listening device down, and you go out into the world and be dangerous to tyrants. And be true to your word and live your life. Because remember, your liberty will be subverted first and always on the local level before it will be anywhere else. These tyrants get by with what they are doing because people or just kicking the can down the road and allowing the local governments to do whatever they want to do. So we have to be dangerous to these tyrants and even unseat them when we see fit. Because it's time for the people, the sovereign people, the people that do not want to be governed by corruption, people that don't want to be governed by bureaucracy. Because that corruption has taken a stake in every part of your being. Now, I don't want people to get the wrong message when we talk about this. The United States is the greatest country in the world, but we have some authoritarian flaws we need to correct, because we know darn well if all of our founding fathers came back, from George Washington to Ethan Allen to Samuel Adams to Thomas Jefferson to I can't even name them all, Brutus, Cincinnatus, they would wage a war against us and be willing to die for it again, because we have gone so far authoritarian in this country. And let's keep in mind, right? Our founding fathers have only been dead for 200 years, 2 lifetimes. They've only been dead for 2 lifetimes. And look how far we have come, because of people with weak minds are not willing to stand up to the state. We've allowed moralist people. I shouldn't even say moralist. We've allowed people that hate liberty to sit in the bureaucracy to govern you, to tell you that you shouldn't believe that collectivism is the best route. Surrender your individuality for the collective. Me personally, I've heard this all my life from people that have skin tones like me. And every single time they say that, I reject them. I rebuke them like I rebuke the devil in my presence. Because collective is not going to help me. It's going to drag me down. It's going to hold me down like an anchor. And I think everybody agrees with that sentiment. I don't know a single true individual that loves liberty that does not disagree with that statement. And if they do, I would love to have a true discussion with them about what they believe individual liberty is, what they believe their role is in the United States. Because Frederick Douglass said in 1883 at a civil rights mass meeting, he said, no man can put a chain about the ankle of his fellow man without at last finding the other end fastened about his own neck. I want people to remember that when they talk about collectivism. Don't ever feel like you have to compromise your individual liberty for a collective. Because that person that is telling you to compromise and sell out your rights are tethered to the state. They are tethered to the state, and we see the examples. It's time for the living man to break the bureaucratic chains of oppression It's time for the living man to stand in the face of tyrants. And I'm not even talking about the government tyrants. I'm talking about the people that you look and listen, you look at and tell you that you need to think this way. It's the anti-ICE protesters that are acting like tyrants you need to stand up to. It's the politicians that don't want people to be deported out of this country, right? These are your tyrants. The people that create regulations that restrict speech or dances around it. These are the tyrants we need to stand up to first because they are tethered to the state apparatus. And come hell and high water, they will use statute, law enforcement to make you buckle to their will. Even to the point when you exercise your rights, they will try to kill you over it for exercising your rights. Those are the people we need to stand up to and stand directly in their damn face and dare them. Because at this point in time, let's keep this all the way real. Some police we can trust and some we can't, but as a whole, we should not trust them because they are an apparatus of the state. And we see the videos all the damn time. And even though, mind you, right, every now and again, I am an agent of the state every now and again. But I would never, ever, ever overstep or create authority from that to oppress a sovereign individual. That's just me. When you got police and sheriff's deputies detaining people because of First Amendment audits, you got law enforcement running around forcing people onto the ground for exercising their Second Amendment. We have a bigger problem with the bureaucratic process than anything. And those people that love to talk about you don't have a right to film me, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy in public. You never did, and you never will. This is why the state puts up cameras to watch what you're doing, but you're worried about an individual videotaping you when the state has it. So you trust the state more with your image than a citizen on the street. I think that logic's a little fucked up. I don't trust the state with my image because the state can do all kinds of things. How many misidentifications the state has and have harmed people, if not killed them over misidentification? Absolutely not. And these damn clowns out here talking about you don't have a right to. Yes, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy. Zero. But this is the state. The state has told them you have all these rights. No, you don't. The Constitution is clear and concise. But you devils out here, you devils, individual liberty will prevail. And all the people that came before you that sacrificed their lives, sacrificed licks from the state to make sure they'll stay intact, you better go thank them for doing that. You better thank them for putting the state in check because please remember, the state can come kick your front door in based on misidentification. And at that point, you're in a compromising position. Huh? I'm gonna leave y'all with this. When You've allowed the state to get as big as it is. It's hard to claw it back. But we have an obligation. We have an obligation to our great grandchildren to make sure our voices are heard, documented on paper and in digital media, so they know, for a lack of better words, I'm going to keep it raw, we weren't a bunch of bitches, but have them understand that what we were up against, because the people before us just complied with the state. We're no longer the Gen X. We're no longer in compliance. We were never in compliance. We were forced into compliance for many reasons, but we're coming out of that. Oh no, we're coming out of that. That's not what we're doing. It's like those individuals fought in World War II to make sure that Hitler didn't come to the United States or Stalin come to the United States, huh? Those same people fought in Vietnam. Down to the people in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Afghanistan. We got to keep the fight going for the sake of our great grandkids. I love y'all. I appreciate y'all. Make sure y'all share this out, all that good stuff. And until next time, everybody. Love your family. Love yourself. Till next time, peace and love, everybody.